Okay, we are now online and recording. Um, Before we start, I just have a opening release statement, and I just wanted to say that. Now, this opening establishes your release and permission to use your likeness, image, and video and/or audio recording. You hereby give the consent to B-Story Pictures or any subsequent company that houses the East Hammond, the Village Grapevine project. Further, you acknowledge and give us for gratis, irrevocable, worldwide rights and perpetuity of these materials, whether they use their advertising, promotion, education, publicity, and or other purpose on behalf of the company. The acquired digital file will remain the property of B-Story Pictures, its subsidiaries or agents. Finally, you waive all rights, claims, and damages. The exploitation of the recording and oral history is acquired for the purposes of education, history, and to uplift the city of East Hammond and its residents. You attest that you fully understand the aforementioned. So do you agree?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, apprehensively, but but anyway. So let me just start off by saying or asking if you can just repeat your name, your age, and what street you grew up on in Hammond, Indiana.
Okay, my name is Eunice Jarrett. I am 63. I grew up as Eunice Burns on Ames Street in Hammond. Well, Ames and Highland.
Okay, Ames and Highland. Okay, and so can you just tell me who was in your household when you were growing up, and say their names, and specifically, your mother and father, and any brothers and sisters that you grew up with?
Okay, it's a long list. Okay,
Okay.
my father was Reverend A.R. Burns, and we didn't know he had a first name until we were big kids. My mother is Mary Burns. My oldest brother was Albert Jr. Okay, let's do them in order. Annie, Albert, Frank, Mary, Margaret, Charles, Teresa, me, Crystal, Gwen, Lucinda, Vincent, and I might have missed Mary.
Okay. Okay, good. So tell me a little bit, let's start off with your parents first. A little bit about your father and where he came from, the city that he came from, and how he got to Hammond.
The stories that I have heard from my parents, my father and mother were both from Enterprise, Mississippi,
Mm-hmm.
and they met and got married. And at some point after they had the first 4 children, my father drove a truck. And one day my mother told me that Daddy came home and said that it was time to move because he saw 2 bodies of young black boys hanging from the bridge. And he was just terrified that something would, happen to his kids. So he wrote 2 letters to relatives in the North, and he said whoever answered him first, that's where he would go. So he had a cousin in Hammond and someone in Detroit, and the Hammond response came first, and the Detroit answer came the next day. And Daddy really wanted to go to Detroit, but he told God he would go wherever the response came first.
Okay. Well, lucky Hammond. Um, so now you said did they get married in Enterprise, Mississippi?
Yes.
Okay. And what did your mom do?
She was, as far as I know, a stay-at-home mom while my dad worked
Okay.
in
So you
Mississippi.
in Mississippi. Okay. So you said he drove a truck. Was it for a company or was it moving or what was it?
As far as I know, it was for a company. My mother said he also worked for the Stonewall Cotton Mill. Now, I don't know if he drove the truck there. She just said he also worked for the Stonewall Cotton Mill.
Okay. And that's just a facility that um, either gathers or manufactures cotton,
Right.
or does it make? Okay.
And they process the cotton so it could be made into cloth.
I get you. Okay. And so once he made that that mandate that the first person who calls, I'm going to move to that city. How long did it take him, or do you know, to actually pack up everything and go, or was it kind of in the middle of the night and we're leaving kind of thing?
No, it was an overtime thing, as far as I know, because I wasn't born yet. But
Okay.
as much as I understand that they took time and Daddy came up first to find housing and find work, and then he sent for my mother. And I think I want to make sure I'm telling her story right. She was saying that when they were on the Mississippi side, when they were on the train and they were on the south side of the country, all
Hmm.
the black people had to be in certain cars, and once they crossed the Mason-Dixon line, they were
Hmm.
told, okay, you can sit anywhere.
Oh, I get you. That's segregation at its height.
You're right.
Um, um, so when he came, before your mom came to Hammond, when he came to Hammond, um, who was the family who brought him in, took him in?
Um, I'm having a
Well,
senior moment. Okay.
okay, but it was a relative though,
Yes,
right?
it was our cousin Lily. Well, cousin Lily, um, last name was Lewis. At
Okay.
least that's what I remember. And
O-
she was the person that sent the letter.
Okay. Okay. And so when he came and stayed with, and moved in with cousin Lily Lewis, um, did she help him find a job, or how did that work? Did he just go searching for jobs, or what's the situation in terms of his employment in Hammond to set up shop for you guys?
All I really understand was that he came north. He stayed up here for a while. And I don't know what the process was, but I know he did find housing and he did find work. And then he sent for my mother.
Okay. Okay. Do you remember what work he found?
As far as I can remember, my father worked for Indiana Harbor Belt Railroad. We call it IHB.
Okay. Indiana Harbor Belt. Okay. And it was a railroad facility, right?
Yes, it's the station is in Hessville.
Oh, okay. Still. Okay. So he set up shop. Did you know if he found housing prior to your mom coming?
Yes, and
Okay.
they actually lived in Hessville, um, but there wasn't that much housing near the train. I don't know if it's the roundhouse, but the train facility, the office, administrative offices, there wasn't a lot of housing there, but my parents were there.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. So you kind of went to Hessville first, or as a family. I know he went to Hammond first, but he went to Hessville, and
But
as a
Hessville is
family.
part of Hammond.
Oh, okay. Okay. Just a subsidiary, or not subsidiary, but a kind of a other neighborhood within Hammond.
Right. It was just a different community. Where we had East Hammond,
Mm-hmm.
Hessville was just a separate community.
Oh, okay. Okay. So did he ever mention to you um, the anxiety from when he was in Hammond prior to you guys coming and leaving you guys and his wife and his kids while he was setting up shop. Did he ever mention, because he knew why he was leaving, because these two people were lynched, did he ever express any kind of like, I got to get these people here quick because I don't know what's going to happen? Do you know what I mean?
You know what? I think it was more of, this is the last straw.
Mm.
It wasn't so much of, this is an emergency evacuation situation. It
Mm-hmm.
was a thing of the racism had just been so strongly shown throughout the years. And he realized that as his children became older, they were at risk just for having a personality, for not giving an appropriate response that someone thought you were being a smart aleck. So I think it was more of a long-term idea rather than, oh, I got to get out of Mississippi now.
That's actually really forward thinking to know that staying in the South under those conditions would actually change people's personality and how they interact with other people. The fact that you said you sat in the back of the train before you crossed the Mason-Dixon line, and then then you could change. You can go and sit anywhere you want after that point. That has to kind of bleed on your psyche a little bit, and so but that's interesting that you would say that.
And may I just also say
Yeah.
that from the stories that they tell around me, it was
Mm-hmm.
very oppressive, because if someone was molested or treated unfairly by someone that was not black, and you tried to report or retaliate, just because you had the nerve to confront somebody, people would come and snatch whole families. They would snatch a loved one in the middle of the night. So all of this stuff was not just rumor, and it wasn't just television. This was the reality that black people lived under. So when people were moving to the North, it wasn't just for jobs. It was also for safety.
Okay. And when people would pull people or grab people in middle of the night or whatever, was it necessarily the Klan or just anybody white who wanted to retaliate against someone who was blew a whistle on them or something?
I didn't understand that it was all organized. I think that it was what we now call privilege. It was
Mm-hmm.
like, how dare you? Okay, how dare you? And these are your consequences. So if you tell your mother that someone has done something inappropriate, she can't tell her husband, right? Because if she tells her husband, then her husband is going to say, I'm going to protect my family. And he's going against a system that does not give him the freedom to retaliate or to even confront. So it's a long-term problem.
Right. So he just has to live with the pain of knowing that someone misused his family. If he were told.
Right.
Right.
So somewhere that pain gets stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
Right.
when
Right.
people
Go ahead. No. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so when people wonder what happened 3 and 4, 2 and 3 generations down the line, I believe that, that pain actually just got stuck. And maybe now it's being, people are responding. The black community somehow has a need to respond to a long-term pain, a chronic pain.
Right. And I actually once heard this professor speak I forgot her name. She's a black woman. But anyway, she gave a lecture on why black people act the way they do now. And I was like, okay, let me just zoom in on this and find out why we do that. And she was saying that after every war, the government gives people like post-traumatic stress syndrome counseling, some type of psychological counseling if you see a lot of, death in your community or in war, and you go through the bombs and all the different things that really a human should not see. I mean, from your best friend at the war being shot right next to you and all that kind of stuff. And then she equated that to the fact that there was all the stuff that black people saw, like a lynching, people dying right next to you, just like the war, or all of the psychological warfare that was imposed against us. There was never any counseling throughout time that we received as a group of people. And she went on to say that when people say, well, you weren't a slave, so you guys should just get over it. That wasn't you weren't a slave, you weren't lynched, or you weren't whatever. And she was saying that what happens is whatever is in people's mind at the time passes on from generation to generation, because if your grandmother is screwed up mentally or suffered some kind of mental stress from what she witnessed, kids learn from their elders. And so they learn certain things, and then that is passed on through generation to generation to generation. So it would in fact be hard to, quote unquote, get over it. So that was the nature of the lecture, and I thought that was interesting, that all of the things that people went through in the South kind of bled over to what was happening in the North once they came to the North and was there, is that you couldn't totally separate or divorce those ideas in your head, and that's what Reverend Burns was actually trying to avoid. It appears, based on what you said, is that why should you guys suffer so much mental frustration and anguish and this, that, and the other? Why don't I stop that now by moving so they don't have long-term effects by that? So that was interesting.
If I could add a postscript,
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, that same scenario works on all segments of Americans, so that traumatic stress has been misdirected for some non-black Americans. So they don't, if I am not black and I tell my children, oh, lynching was fun, it was entertainment, okay? If I tell my children, oh, those black slaves, they were ungrateful and they weren't loyal, okay? That still is a level of stress, misdirected stress for that generation. So now we're going to clash. Our generations are going to clash because now we're being fed stories that do not show a truth of humanity.
Yes. And it's interesting when you said that was a form of entertainment for some of the mainstream privileged people. And I think it has also been said that the word picnic stood for pick a nigga from a tree.
Right.
And they abbreviated it by calling it picnic. And that's literally when black people would be hanging from a tree, and then they would be serving food and, celebrate, and it would be outside, so that's what they call it, picnic. So sometimes today, when we say the word picnic, we really don't know the origins of that. And so I say barbecue. So I would rather say barbecue than basically picnic or pick a nigga from a tree, because I know where it comes from. And so I think it's important that these little things, these little metaphors, cliches, or words that have been passed down, once you know the origins of certain things, you might change your mind of actually participating in that practice of saying that. Same thing with, when some of us today say the word nigga as a term of endearment. Yo, my nigga, what's up, my nigga, 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 nigga. And if you go back to, say, 1921, Black Wall Street, where they had, before the actual burning of Greenwood, which is near Tulsa, there was 67 lynchings that year. And where they're hanging from the tree, die, nigga, nigga, nigga. So when you hear the word in its original context, it really would be hard to really understand why you would say, yo, my nigga. I mean, you don't understand? There's a paradox, there's a quandary there in why one would say that. But then once with the sign of the times and the sagging pants and this, that, and the other, and if people know the origins of sagging pants and all that, from the prisons, and just saying that you are open to some homosexual activity if you sag your pants, I don't think they look at why you're saying or certain words and doing certain things. There's no deepness in thought process.
As a school teacher, I think our youth process information differently than we do. And I also think that it's like if somebody throws a rock at you and think that's going to hurt you, and you say, you know what, I can carry all these rocks in my pocket, okay? So if something that used to be hurtful, you can claim as your own and turn it into something that's not hurtful, that really ticks off the person that's trying to abuse you or trying to disrespect you. Okay, so to me, I didn't like the terminology, but I also was in college at a time that I started using that word to take away the power that spiritually, to me, there was a negativity on that word. So every time I spoke it as a term of endearment, I was like, okay, you know what? I'm turning this into our word. And, of course, my father hated it. I couldn't use it in the house.
Okay, so you were
spiritually,
just diffusing that word by saying it.
And I think for the college kids at the time when I was in college, when we used the word as a term of endearment, right, we were switching the context and we were turning it into something that was positive for us. So that if somebody on the street says it, it's not going to have the same ouch, okay? Because I've heard it used in a gentle way. I'm not going to get as ticked off with you, okay?
Okay, I get you.
That's just one mindset.
Okay, yeah, that's certainly a mindset that most rappers use the word. I mean, constantly in songs and this, that, and the other, and not just rappers, but just young brothers on the street, and it's now so rampant until it's hard to even not say it in certain areas, because it's like when someone says or you know what I'm saying, or these words that really are filler words that don't really I guess, pass the sentence on in its true meaning. You just, instead of saying, you say, yo, my nigga, yo, nigga, and so and I understand what you just said too, in terms of diffusing that word so it doesn't have the same sting or impact. And so if one says it enough, then if someone really says it, our white counterparts say it, it doesn't hurt as much. Now, I think the younger generation reaction when their white counterparts say it is much different than, someone in Jim Crow era. So they would, acquiesce, but the younger generation is immediate fight. Anyway.
May I also say that
Yes.
I think there's a possibility that the word is also changing to, for some people who don't have any black people in their realm,
Mm-hmm.
for some of them the word means friend because they hear people use it in that context.
Right.
So I have been like at the gas station, or I've been like going down the street, and I'll look at a group of non-black teens, and they'll say stuff like, "Oh, nigga, wait up," and I'm like,
right.
"Who is he talking to?" And it's not said in a mean way. It's not said as a put down. It's 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 their way. Now it's not. It's cultural appropriation, but I just understand that the word is going through some kind of transition.
Right. No, I get it. And then, I think it's a generational word too, because I've heard white people also refer to themselves as, my nigga kind of thing. And I look at it like, oh, that's different. And so the denotative meaning is one thing, and the connotative meaning is yet another,
Mm-hmm.
to different people. Okay, so let's move on to your. So now the family is here, and everyone. Did you say you're on Field Street? Was it?
No, they started in Holman, in Hessville, and then we moved to Ames Street.
Ames Street.
When I
Okay.
was born, we lived on Ames Street.
Okay. So when you were growing up on Ames Street, it was. Let's see. Was it like the 50s, right?
Right.
Like the early 60s, around there. So can you remember when you were, running around on Ames Street, who your neighbors were to the left and right?
I don't remember names so much, but I know.
Oh no, if you don't remember them,
we
that's
may have to edit this. Okay.
uh,
There was there was a
okay.
there was a little. We called her the little old lady next door, and she was Polish, and she would wear her scarf, her little babushka, and we only knew
Mhm.
that because that's what they said. And she had a husband, and then across the street, directly across the street, was another family. So I think there were still Polish people on the block, or they claim. That's all I understood. I didn't hear any other country being used. I just heard Polish. So
Okay.
there were still quite a few Polish people on the block, and they were usually the older diehards because people were
Mhm.
saying, that was when, if a community had black people, that they were going to, they were going to, okay, I'm getting interrupted for 1 second.
Okay.
Then just take the whole thing. I'm being recorded. Okay. Um, if black people moved into a neighborhood, then that neighborhood was seen as being on the decline and not as safe. So usually the older people would stay because usually they had equity in their homes, or
Mhm.
that they just claimed it as their community, and they were like, I'm staying. So some were
Right.
nice and some were stubborn.
Okay, okay. So do you view yourselves as one of the, the early pioneer blacks who moved to Hammond? Or was there already a group of black people there? I mean, a lot of black people. Or was it, I mean, there certainly at that time period, there was a bunch of, it was mainly Polish. As a matter of fact, I lived on Conkey Street, and right next door to me to the right was Androff.
Mhm.
There was a Polish company there. I thought it was a gas company or whatever it was. But yeah, I know Pearline Jenkins lived across the street. And so there were Polish people sprinkled around, and this was Conkey Street, and this, so we'll get to that in a second. But um, so yeah, it was a mixed community, at the time. So tell me, what school did you go to as an elementary school?
I went to Maywood School.
Okay, the Maywood. Okay,
Mr.
and
Boone was the principal.
Mr. Boone,
Mhm.
Boone.
Yes.
Okay, and who were your girls? Who did you hang out with, or was it with your family? I mean, who'd you walk to school with?
Normally, I walked to school with family. You know, when I was first going to school, normally I just stayed because I had 7 sisters, 5 brothers,
Mm,
so somebody was going to school at the same time. Um,
mm, okay.
Eventually, you get a little older and then you break off and you have friend clusters. So I would
Hmm.
say some of my friends, a number of my friends were other kids that went to church with us. So
Okay.
that was another way to, gain friendship, how to know people. Parents would interact and they would approve us, having a friendship. So I think some of my earlier friends were like the Carpenter girls, Janice and Shirley, and my sister hung out with Jean Thompson, and I eventually learned Michael, Nance, Elise Nance. They moved from
Hmm.
Chicago, but this was like the late 60s.
Okay. Okay. Michael Nance and Jean. Yeah. Real. Um. So 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 those were the girls that you hung out with, and so in elementary. Now, did you retain those friendships as you went to? Did you go to Hammond High or Tech?
I went to Hammond High.
Hammond High. Okay. So were they still your girls, the Carpenter girls and, Nance's and Jean? Were they still people you hung out with in high school?
Um, it was yes and no. Um, I also had my cousin Rosie Ricks, but when I got to high school, okay, let me just because my father was the minister. Now this is
Hmm.
just Eunice's story, okay? Because my
Okay.
father was the minister, and it was the 60s, late 50s, 60s. There were people in Hammond that wanted to start to diversify their relationships. There were ministers that wanted to have more contact with the black community. So there were times that they would call my father and say, could you send some of your kids to this event? Could you send some of your kids to our church social? So
Mm.
we became kind of the kids that would go, and I had to quickly have to find a level of comfort being the only or one of a few black people in a cultural situation.
Mm. Okay. You were
So
the
it was
token
almost,
black girl.
I'm glad you said it. Okay. So that ambassador mentality carried on when I went to high school.
Okay. So you were comfortable in getting some white friends. That's what I'm hearing.
I felt it was
Necessary?
I needed to be, if nobody else, and I just needed to be in the mix. And I
Mm-hmm.
actually made friends and developed a level of comfort that from time to time, I have to know that because, I did develop really good friendships, and I developed a level of comfort over time.
Okay. Okay. Now, and
Sounds
and I
like
get
feeling
it.
some issues coming
so, so, um, so do you feel that? First of all, what was the makeup of Hammond High at the time in terms of percentage of black kids and percentage of white kids or Latin?
um, you know what? I can't give you scientific numbers. I just know that there, for our senior class, there weren't that many. Okay, I would say I doubt if it was 20%.
Okay.
We could confirm that because I worked on the yearbook that year, and I got to do the senior section. So I probably could pull a book and confirm that for you at another time.
Okay. Okay.
But
So, so it just with that 20% being black, um, how was the makeup of the racial environment at the time?
you know, um, okay, when I came to Hammond High, there was still, the communities were still very segregated.
Hmm.
Black people pretty much lived in East Hammond. When we moved from when we moved from Ames to Highland, the real estate term was that the block had been broken. So I didn't understand the social. I listened to a storyteller, and she was talking about how her family was supposed to hold the block, which meant not sell to black people.
Mm.
Because I didn't understand the term. I was hearing, oh, the Burns broke the block. I didn't know what that meant, okay? But
Mm. Uh-huh.
the other block had been broken because I know that Bob Smith, Mr. Bob Smith and Miss Nadine Smith, um,
Hmm.
and some Alexanders lived in the next block. So as black people moved, because there was a time when they were saying that, if you went to what we call Maywood Park, there could be problems. But then as the blocks began breaking and East Hammond began expanding, then that made a different culture for Hammond High. Okay, because
Mm. Okay.
East Hammond, for as far as I knew at the time, was Columbia to Calumet, and then it went, back. The length varied from time to time.
Hmm. So if like from 160, from Columbia to Calumet, 165th to what, Highland?
Hmm
Or was it less than Highland? I mean,
It eventually grew to Highland, and then eventually it went across the park.
hmm.
So
Okay.
okay, when I was in Hammond High, and I'm not sure what the event was that triggered, um, but I just know I was at Hammond High, and there was supposedly a riot because from time to time we would have these little fights that would be racial. It's like
Hmm.
someone would antagonize somebody, and they didn't think the black kids would fight back, and the guys usually two or three would fight, and then it would this was like usually small over the years, but this particular year for me at Hammond High, which I may still be traumatized by, I don't want to think I am, but I do get
Uh-huh.
angry. Something happened, and I guess they separated kids by race, and they put all the black kids in the cafeteria, and they put all the white kids in the auditorium. Now, I don't know whether it was
Two.
just the seniors or whether it was school-wide, but two of my friends came down to the cafeteria in tears, and they said, two girls came down and they said, I can't stay in the auditorium because the boys are jumping up and down on the chairs saying, kill the niggers. And slowly there were white kids that came down to the cafeteria. And that's a memory. Now, how authentic that memory is, we'd have to fact check it. But I know that some of the kids that came down that day are the ones that are still my friends.
So the when the administrators or teachers separated the black kids from the white kids, were they avoiding a problem or were they creating a problem? I mean, did they separate them? What was the purpose of separating the kids?
I think there must have been some kind of confrontation between two groups, and so they separated us. But see, in the cafeteria, we were just sitting down. We were angry. We were frustrated, but we were pretty much just sitting there trying to figure out what was going on while all this ruckus was going on upstairs. And I think the ongoing frustration of boys will be boys and they get to act out, but then our boys can't be boys.
I'm sorry, what was that last thing? But our boys what?
Okay, our boys, okay? When non-black children act out their frustrations or when they're just doing something that's stupid but they think it's fun, we're criminal.
Oh, right.
But
Right. It's how.
but it's perceived. It was perceived, oh, boy, they're just boys being boys, okay? So to go and egg somebody's house, for some students, that was fun. To TP somebody's house, throw toilet paper all over somebody's front yard and, kind of try to deface their property with toilet paper was seen as a fun thing. But cleaning that stuff up was not anything pretty.
Right. Right.
Okay?
No, I get you.
So
Right.
So
So
there were some tensions, especially, and we actually had a walkout. It was something about Black History Month. We wanted to do some program for Black History Month, and the administration said no. And so the black students, we got together, and it wasn't that many of us seniors, but Crystal was a freshman, and I was like, Crystal, we're going to have a walkout, but we're telling freshmen don't come. Okay? And then I told my friends, I said, if my mama drives by, I got to go back in.
because mama got a belt and she don't play.
She don't play. We can do Black History at home.
Right. So how many people participated and was it effective?
Actually, it was effective, and I think two things happened. I think we just wanted to fill our oats, and we actually got approval for a Black History class. And then it was like, we were like, we don't need it. We know already. So it was...
Oh,
okay.
Arrogant black kids, okay.
But we did we did have opportunities to do Black History types of things.
Okay. So in the long run, it did open up some eyes and it was effective. I mean, for the next group
for
of
the
black
coming
kids.
generations, yes, because I know other other groups had already done so much groundbreaking before I got there,
Mm-hmm.
but at least we kind of knew how to organize because there had never been a black homecoming queen, and we counted numbers, and we said, you know what, if every black person votes for the same person, we have enough we have enough votes. We can get a black homecoming queen. But then we had two girls that wanted to be queen. So it split the
Uh-oh.
vote.
So nobody became the queen. I mean,
But
black.
I think my sister Crystal was a homecoming princess. Okay,
Hmm.
so it was like, even though the senior class couldn't get it together, at least the idea worked.
Right. And it opened up minds for the next generation of kids or lower class. Okay.
Yeah,
Lower class meaning freshmen, sophomore,
right. Underclass.
juniors to underclass.
Underclass.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's why I had to. I said, wait a minute, not lower class. Let me change that. Um, okay. And was there any at that time? Was there any other outside of Hammond High and East Hammond when you guys traveled to other areas in Hammond, like maybe downtown and this, that, and the other? Was there any other tensions, racial tensions, or was it pretty cool at the time?
You know what? People people pretty much had the unspoken rules, so black people kind of knew where to go and where to not go.
Mhm.
So even though my classmates, there are a couple of my classmates that when we were talking about having a class reunion, I, they were saying, well, a lot of people have hurt feelings, or a lot of people say this was not a good memory. This is not something they want to come back to. And then I shared with them, I said, since I was on student government, then I tried to be places and do things, and it was a float party across Holman, and black people didn't live across Holman. But because I was on student government, I was going to go to the float party to help build the float for homecoming. And we were looking for this house, and it was, I don't even remember who we were, but it was more than me. It was maybe 3 black people in a car. And the police
Mhm.
stopped us and turned us around. They're like, where are you going? And we're like, we're supposed to go help decorate the float for Hammond High. They said, not tonight. Go home. So we went
Mm.
home. Okay? And they were like, we were wondering why. And I'm like, okay. And they thought that we didn't want to go, like, I don't even know. See, since I couldn't go, because they would talk about the burger places they'd hang out, and I was like, we couldn't go. They thought we didn't want to go, but
Oh, I
it was
get it.
okay. So the white kids had these things going on, thinking they never thought that there's no black people here, or if they thought there were no black people here, then somebody told them, well, they don't want to come here. But we didn't feel like it was a safe thing, or our parents would say, no, that's not for you.
Well, yes. Right. That's an eye opener right there when there are these glass ceilings or walls that you see things that you might want to do and but you can't do it just because it's for safety or you know it's you're not really welcome. They can say do certain things, but you're not I mean, globally welcome. I'm sure the students welcomed you guys to do the float, but then society or the police officers who are representing mainstream society said, no, you can't.
Right,
Go home.
right. We're protecting this neighborhood from a 90-pound girl.
Mm. Exactly. She could run amok.
with
So,
with scissors.
so do you remember at the time um, any movers or shakers, any people within the of the black community who got stuff done, who pushed things through, or when someone had an agenda, they would say, oh, we got to call so-and-so because that person will help get this thing done, whatever that thing is. Do you remember anyone?
The ministers were always, well, because I was a preacher's kid, then I thought ministers were on the front line. Because if somebody's kid got put in jail, my father would get a call in the middle of the night, and he'd go talk to somebody, and they might release, especially if he was a member of our church, then he might get released under my father's recognition, right? But my father also said, if we got picked up, don't call him.
Oh.
Okay.
That's what my mother would tell me that, as a matter of fact. Go ahead.
So, and the Alexanders, and actually, when I'm thinking about, there were people, and now I'm sitting here going, because I'm looking, and when I was at the NAACP, did I see a Martis? Because I'm like going, you know that name? That was a mover shaker name. Yeah, so
I know like a Jewel Alexander, is that who you're referring to?
yeah.
Do you remember any one particular thing that it took the community to kind of galvanize one another and get together to do this thing that it wouldn't have happened without like a community support? I'm talking about black community.
Okay, now my mother laughed at me because I'm 15 years younger than my older sister. Okay, so when Annie was trying to teach in Hammond, and the NAACP and Richard Hatcher, there were a number of people that were very important getting her case moved, her court case, to allow her to become a teacher in Hammond. I was a little girl, and I remember one of the deacons standing up at church and saying, we're going to take up an offering for the pastor because we wanted to help him something with his daughter, right? So all I remember was that this was like, for me, like a first. They're taking up an offering for Daddy. No. But the community really did rally. They really did. They tried to give financial support. It wasn't a whole bunch available, but people would sit. People would stand with my parents. They would stand behind Annie, and it would not have happened if East Hammond was not the community that it is. Because we would go to Maywood School, and we had some really good teachers, but they weren't, there were some insights that they didn't have, okay? It made a difference when Ms. Hicks said, I'm calling your mama. If Ms. Webb said she was calling our mother, that was bad enough. But see, Ms. Hicks might see your mother in church. Ms. Hicks might see your mother in the store. Ms. Hicks might be walking down the street and see your mother cutting the grass. So it was a whole different dynamic to have a black teacher in the school.
Mm-hmm. And so so when Annie Hicks integrated the teaching staff, it was Maywood School?
Yes.
Okay. And when she got there, of course I'll ask her too, but when she got there, did she come home with stories of welcoming arms with her, or kind of dissension in the ranks kind of thing, like avoiding was it a bad experience or was it a good experience from listening to her?
You have to listen, but I would say one, Maywood, if they tried to put her in Kenwood School or some other school, they weren't going to have it, okay? But Maywood was the school that was in the black community, okay?
Okay.
So Maywood probably had the highest percentage of African American kids. And Mr. Boone, I'm almost positive Mr. Boone was still the principal when she was there. And he was nothing to mess with, okay? He was a even-handed principal. It was right and it was wrong. He didn't care who your mother was. He didn't care what color you were. I felt like he stood for, he walked his talk. So he was very supportive of Annie. She made many friends over time, lifelong friends that I understand. And then everybody else that came through, including myself, knew that she opened that door because there were no Hispanic teachers, there were no Asian teachers. When she went in, as they say, she broke that color barrier.
Okay. And so when you were teaching, you also went to Maywood, taught in
No,
Maywood?
when I started teaching, I started at Edgar School.
Okay. Edgar School. Okay.
And it turned into a middle school.
A middle school. Okay. Um, so I guess one of the big people behind Annie even teaching at Maywood, was that your father? And did he galvanize other people like Reverend Parrish? And did he get other people to join in his plight?
Yes, and like I was saying, and because in my mind, there's an overlap of community and church. So there are people that I can't call by name that are movers and shakers because they were like our friends from church. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, right.
So it's like I know people as an adult now. I know they were movers and shakers.
Mm-hmm.
But as, for you to call on my child memory, then it's like,
That was just a person in church who was doing some stuff. Right.
like Gail's son is not necessarily that impressed with Oprah, okay?
Oh, right.
It's not that you're not impressed. It's like, this is just your reality. So, yes, when you start saying people's names, I don't think I'm going to be good at names right now. But, yes,
okay.
The people that were supportive were like the deacons and Reverend Parrish and there's so many names that I don't really know. There are people I knew them as my parents' friends, but I didn't have to remember their names.
Hey, there is. Probably call uncle or aunt. Okay, so give me your recollection of Conkey Street. And when I say Conkey Street, I was talking about I'm talking more about the 1100 block where the taverns and the grocery store, the entrepreneurial part where black people had businesses. And if you remember all those. And did your dad let you go to Conkey Street? I should say that. That's probably a better question.
Well, because Brooks House was adjacent to the intersection that you're talking about. Yes, and then, like the cleaners was there, the Harwell cleaners. we could go there. There was the store. My sister Crystal's godmother had the candy store. Um,
Okay.
so we could go to the store.
Is that the candy store, were their last names Williams, the owners?
I think so.
Okay, because that was,
Because,
I have a note that that was the first candy store in Hammond, or East Hammond, and I think that was the Williams, and I just didn't have the first name of the Williams. I just heard the Williams Candy Store.
I need to be able to find that name for you, because it was just Miss TT's store.
Miss
Okay.
T.T. Okay, T.T. Williams there.
So,
Okay.
yeah, so that was the store, and I know there was like places to buy food
Hmm.
and a pool hall.
Yeah, I think the Blackmans own that, Francis Blackman's dad, I think, owned that pool hall.
So there was only so far we could go.
Right. That was a taboo area. And I can understand because I asked a number of people the question about, that particular street, and I actually lived on that street, but I lived further down, 900 blocks, so it wasn't as rowdy, although I did see a number of rowdy things happen on my end of the street. Um, but some of the things that happened on that street, and you would ask the questions, why were we so rowdy? And some people said that, when people went there, um, what people had these jobs at Inland Steel, U.S. Steel, Pullman Standard, and, it was more of an industrialized time period where you're on assembly lines and this, that, and the other. And since um, Chicago it's not that far, but it was a distance away. This was the street where people from Hammond can go and let their hair down, so to speak.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what they did. And it was close by. And even people from Gary came, and people from East Chicago would come because there were, I think Archie Moore had some kind of, I think, Trinity Hall, something
Oh
where you
yes.
could perform and music and this, that, and the other. Um, so yeah, it was just a place where people could let their hair down after working all these shifts on I remember my dad working at Inland Steel, like double shifts. He would always do double shifts and, bring money into the
Mhm.
household, this, that, and the other. And, I am not sure. I know it was better than the South. In the South, you can work from sun up to sundown and get little money, where that was the problem, and they wanted to have a better life, and so they would go from the south to the north, and always willing to work. And that was one situation I thought that, I saw black men working working hard, um, and so that's what Conkey Street, I saw Conkey Street was a release from all the stress and strain of working so many hours and this, that, and the other. Because most of the families, the guys worked in these factories. Um, I remember my dad said that Inland Steel had about 30,000 people in its heyday, employees. And
Mhm.
when robotics came in, they actually decreased it to about 5,000 people pushing buttons and do what all those 25,000 other people would be doing.
Mhm.
And then when that happened, it almost decimated the cities like Gary. I mean, I don't know if Gary still recovered from
Mm-mm.
that.
No.
Um, so so what do you think about just that, the fact that you were around, maybe you couldn't go totally deep on in Conkey Street, but you certainly knew that there were these companies that black people owned and this, that, and the other. What do you think about when urban renewal came in and kind of got rid of, kind of wiped out the, I mean, is it good that all the taverns but the other businesses and stuff went away because of the housing, or was it better that we have good housing, and what did that do to the entrepreneurial spirit of black people who wanted to do more than just be an employee? What do you think about that?
Okay. First, that was a long question. Second, may I back up to a couple things?
Yes, certainly.
When you were talking about how the men would often just have a place to vent and do that alpha man thing and just kind of have fun in a manly way, Reverend John Parrish told us from time to time he said that when he went to Inlandsville, you had to take tests for them to decide what job you could have. So he said he was sitting in a room and that he took the test, and when he finished the test, I think he said he finished first, and he went to the front, and the guy checked his paper, and he said, you have a perfect score, but the only job we can give you is in the, I don't know what it was called, the firing part of the mill, where he actually qualified, where he could be administrative or have a white shirt.
Right.
Okay? But they said, and the man said, and you can help me grade the rest of these people's tests. Okay, so Reverend Parrish took that job knowing that he was more qualified than the people whose papers he was grading. So he knows when he's there and people don't want to come to work, and he gets that overtime, and he's coming out covered with soot and where steel has bounced off of him and burned through his, his safety stuff. Even though he was getting the money, there was still that frustration. And I think some of that frustration was coming to Conkey Street.
Right. So basically a lot of people may have had that frustration because you're black. You can only do these jobs, this job, and this job, even though you're qualified to do other jobs that might even pay a little bit more.
Oh, right. And you're not going to come home as tired. You know, you can come home and play with the kids, but when you've worked 2 shifts, you're not going to feel like playing with the kids. Okay?
Right.
And the other thought I was going to say was at that time, I became very conscious that there was a class system being spoken about in the black community, because one day I went to school and I paid for my rental fee with a check. And a number of kids were like, oh, who she thinks she is? She thinks she can pay her rental fee with a check. I didn't understand.
What was the rental fee for?
Pardon? The school, when I went to school and to pay my book rental.
Oh, okay, I get you.
Okay, so all the kids, every year you pay your book rental. Well, I took a paper check. That paper check meant that my daddy might have some money in the bank. But everybody didn't bank. And it wasn't that they didn't want to bank. Okay? There were kids that would say to me like, oh, you think you're something. And I'm like, you're not my friend, so you don't know what I think. But
that's funny. Well, you know what? A lot of older generation didn't trust the banks,
right.
and so the thing is, it's not that they didn't know how to bank. but they just didn't. I mean, I remember my grandmother hiding money, in the Bible, in the
Yes,
drawer, in the curtain, underneath the Chester drawer. I mean, just all these places. you know, it's
because
like
you
once
never
you
knew when you were going to need it.
right, and if the man um, could control if he can say you can't have this job, he could possibly say you can't take that money out of the bank, and we're holding your account for now. I mean,
And if they lived through the 1920s and after, that was a very real and smart move.
right, putting it in your mattress or whatever. Um, yeah, no, I get it. So, so it wasn't always because you weren't intelligent enough to put your money in the bank. We had
No,
other
no.
reasons. Oh, for sure. No, I know.
And there were some people that I'm guessing may have gone to the bank, and they said, no, we won't open an account for you. I didn't know that everybody in East Hammond did not have running water.
Hmm. Okay, that's new. I didn't hear that either.
And you're not going
And
to hear that because I think people are not, mm, because we've moved so far from it. But I've heard friends say that when they were in elementary school, the water, they had indoor water, but they didn't have like indoor bathtub, or they didn't
hmm.
have a bath. They bathed in a tub that you had to fill up.
Oh, I get you. Like in the old days, you just had to warm your water up, put it in there,
Right.
but it had drains and stuff, didn't it?
You know what? I
Or
never asked them how they got the water out, but I know that they were talking about that was one of the chores was to fill the bathtub.
hmm. Okay, that sounds like a Western. but
So so because we didn't, okay, I didn't know.
hmm.
So for me, um, and this can be off the record. We'll talk
Okay.
about that. We'll talk about this after the recording's off. But I think
Okay.
that there be when you talk about the when they came through with the new housing,
hmm.
I think that affected how people felt about class in East Hammond because actually we had famous and infamous movers and shakers, and some of the
hmm.
infamous movers and shakers are famous. You know what I'm saying?
hmm. Now, are you saying like a Bruce Green, or like, or what do you mean fame? Or are
Okay,
you talking
so
like
yes,
a Herb?
I'm just saying
Okay.
that there were people that maybe I wasn't able to hang out with
Uh huh.
that were actually movers and shakers. Maybe not in a way that I felt was positive, but they
hmm.
still made a
They
change,
made
a
a change,
long-lasting change.
and I heard there were groups like the Red Caps, um, who came in and did, and I mean it was along the time where say Black Panthers were doing their thing, but this one wasn't the Black Panthers, the Red Caps, and they came in and there was also some motorcycle, um, was it something Disciples? I forgot the name of them, but I think they were from Chicago though. But Hammond had their groups of organized people who pushed things through. Um, and I understand that some of it was positive stuff and negative stuff. Um, I don't know what your understanding was.
I would be glad to discuss that with you, but off recording.
Okay. Okay, not a problem. Um,
Okay.
okay, so let me just get your impression of Brooks House and what that meant to you guys. And was it just a building, or what kinds of things did you do there?
I miss Brooks House so much because Brooks House was a settlement house, and every immigrant group that came through, this is my opinion, that other that immigrant groups coming to America actually were able to become accepted Americans because of the settlement house movement, because they took you in and they said, okay, here is the American culture. Here's the way that we do things. Here's the way you show love for and respect for your country. Okay? And I think that Brooks House did that for my generation, but they
Hmm.
also allowed us to keep our identity as black people. So there
Mm.
was, they were just, Miss Tanner was my fourth grade teacher. She also was very influential at Brooks House. She was very believing that our kids were like the best kids. You couldn't mess with a Brooks House kid. You couldn't mess with a Maywood Park kid if Miss Tanner was there. Um, and I'm not saying that she had her support team from the community,
Hmm.
but Crystal was saying that there used to be bike races. Um, they used to have the little Olympics, intramural or whatever, Park Olympics, and that they had this bike race, and the other kids had these, really state-of-the-art bikes. So Maywood kids were fast, but, our bikes just didn't keep up. The technology didn't keep up. She said one year Miss Tanner showed up with this state-of-the-art bike. She said, everybody's riding this. She said, Crystal, this
Okay.
is what Crystal said at Miss Tanner's memorial. She said they blew everybody out. Okay, they won with, everybody was in their dust. Okay, and
Mm.
that was like such a proud moment for any of and I think it was a girls' bike team. Okay, but she gave us a sense of self-pride. She did our Girl Scouts. Um, so there were people at Brooks House that really cared, and the neighborhood came there. So I can't name so much individual people at Brooks House from the neighborhood,
Hmm.
um, because I do believe Miss Durr was the librarian there for a while, but we at least had a library in East Hammond, which we don't have now.
Hmm.
They had all kind of classes. I mean, I know Paula Macy had a ballet class. Lord knows I was terrible. But there were,
Okay.
you could take, different people would come. Whoever had a skill, they could like do piano lessons for you. And the kids, we had this wonderful thing. And you should have been old enough to go. Brooks House sponsors something called the Fishnet.
The
And they
fish
took
net.
the Fishnet,
Uh,
Nets, because, like God said, be fishers of men.
right.
So when Reverend Macy was at the chapel, his wife and some of the other people decided that the teenagers needed somewhere to go, and they put us on a committee, and we transformed the garage behind the chapel into like a kids club,
Mm, okay.
and teenagers could come there. We had like a reading room, and we had a place where people could dance, and we had a dry bar. You could only buy pop and chips.
There's a dry bar for you.
And and kids from East Hammond, and it was really where church kids and not church kids could interact together
Hmm.
outside of school.
Right. Right.
And it wasn't like anybody was trying to save anybody's soul. It was just kids, and it was like right there at close to the intersection of Conkey Street.
Okay. So there was a number of organized things in Hammond. And I guess school being one, Brooks House being the next one, and then your group, the other group being one of them in terms of just getting people together. And for me, East Hammond was the biggest city in the world. I mean, when I was a kid, until I grew up, and then I said, "Wait a minute, is this it? What? I remember it being bigger than this." so I could run 400 meters and be out of Hammond, East Hammond. So when you think of Hammond, or East Hammond at the time you grew up, what do you think East Hammond gave you? And when I say East Hammond, I'm referring to the people at that time period. I know East Hammond is different now, but at that time, what do you think those people left you with, embedded in your mind?
I think East Hammond for me there was that sense of being watched over, because my mother and I recently laughed. One day I was walking home from Hammond High and I had a sucker stick in my mouth. I was eating a lollipop, right? Somebody called my mother and told her I was smoking. My mother met me at the front door with the belt. I luckily still had that lollipop stick in my mouth.
Luckily, see,
I
you
told her,
almost...
now had I thrown that stick away, nobody's going to say that whoever it was not telling the truth on me. But I don't think she had her glasses on.
Well, and see, it's good and the bad, because you had the people who are just Gladys Kravitz kind of just talking, and then you had the people really righteously looking out for your well-being. Are you gossiping, or are you looking out for my well-being?
Yes, because there was another lady, as I was an adult. She knew that I was dating someone on your street, and she said she saw me with my boyfriend one day. She said, "Baby, I used to see you with that boy, and I would just pray for you. I would just pray for you."
That's funny, because I know that boy.
And she never really spoke to me, as a person. I mean, she was an adult. It wasn't like she was an adult that I had contact with. But as we both were, as I grew up and I had contact with her, to me, that was like the sweetest thing. And I think that's what some of our children lack, is that random people were actually believing in the good in you. Okay?
Right.
It wasn't, no matter what we were doing, no matter what a kid may be on Conkey Street doing, somebody somewhere was seeing the good in the kid, okay? So I was not allowed to say, well, this kid, because of where they live, I'm like, they can spit from their house to our house. So we're the same kid. I felt like I had different opportunities than some of the kids had. So that made my life different. But it wasn't by my doing. It wasn't, it wasn't like a kid who didn't have the same opportunities. It wasn't like they did anything wrong. And it wasn't like their parents had to do anything wrong. So the humanity, for me, there was a humanity that East Hammond gave that, because I had people telling me that I thought I was better, but I knew I wasn't. Okay. I had people that knew I wasn't. Okay? And there were people that I had friends that people kind of gave a hard time. And I knew that I have one friend, and she just had the best heart in the world, but she would fight. You hear me? She would fight. And she would fight at the, don't roll your eye at her. Don't. She fight you and your brother. Okay? So I just
Mm.
so
No, go ahead.
there's a part of me that um, had to fight the perception of there were some vocal people that would be in the faces of my brothers and sisters with whatever their insecurities were and projected them on us. Okay?
Mm.
But I also saw I saw the community where you could find your own group. You could find your own, somebody's going to have your back. Okay? It may not be the same, everybody, there were enough little cliques and groups of people that you weren't by yourself. But it wasn't like the gang thug thing, you
Right.
know what I'm saying?
Right. Right. Did they look at you as, you know, the Burnses or Reverend Burns, at the patriarch or, at the top of the chain, did they look at you, like you were a celebrity, or were they envious of you because that's the preachers, that's Mount Zion was like the key church there. And when Reverend Burns took over Mount Zion and did a lot of stuff for Mount Zion, including building that plaza, senior citizen plaza. I mean, it was a situation where you guys were at the top of the food chain. Did they look at you guys as though you're top of the food chain and act or treat you as such?
Teachers at school
Hmm.
would constantly remind us that we were Burns. And I'm like, okay, but I can't do math. No, um, scratch that part. Because I had to, there's a STEM thing going on now, so, we don't want to, but um, I think that the awareness that
Uh-huh.
there were what I call social class divisions that weren't real, because
Hmm.
there were people, because I'm guessing uh, that the parishes and the McClendons and whoever, their kids were getting a little the same flack,
Hmm.
okay? Um, so it was, and it's because it was me. I mean, if 20 people came to me, then I'm going to feel like this is what people think, whereas the majority of people may not have cared at all. But there was I don't know, there, the community has so many things going on that different families had different perceptions, okay?
Hmm.
So,
So,
no, you go.
so did you feel that you could not, because you're a Burns, or because you are Reverend Burns' daughter, did you feel that you couldn't act up because you're being judged differently because of your dad?
I think my other sisters did, but by the time I got there, I was tired of it. So I was, it was kind of like after a while, I was not the same Burns. I was a little more rebellious. One, because I went to college. So when
Hmm.
I got away from Hammond and I saw other mindsets and I saw a little that boys will be boys stuff with no consequence, okay, um, then I really challenged some of the household thinking. And I don't know, but I was the one that would cuss. So you don't have to put that in there. But
Too late. No.
um, but I think as an adult, and now I get to interact with a lot of people that I didn't really know coming up. Um, there are many people that think they know stuff about the burns just because it was a generic term, just like different families. I mean, you could say a family name and somebody's going to think they know something, okay?
Mhm.
So somebody could say your last name, and then I'm talking about your last name, and people are going to start naming your cousins or your whoever, your uncles. And so when you say Burns, they're going to name my cousins. I had enough sisters and brothers, they didn't even have to go that far down the line.
Right. And you can say a person's last name, but not, because I really didn't hang out with any Burnses, but everybody knew the Burnses. And I mean, obviously I've spoken to your dad before, at Mount Zion and this, that, and the other, and I knew Crystal and, but unless you go over there and, when I say go over there, go to your house or go
Mm-hmm.
or in class with the Burns, you kind of don't know them unless you interact with them. But everybody knows you but don't know you. I mean, kind of, you know what I mean? Unless they really know you and they say, oh, yeah, we go skating and stuff all the time, whatever. So, no, I get what you mean by that. Well, now, who was Edward Burns?
Okay, now we had two. Oh, Edward Burns was not related to us. Edward lived across
Oh,
the street. His sister's name was Jane, and I think he ended up being like an EMT.
oh, okay. Because my sister hung out with Edward Burns, and I thought that he was a Burns, Reverend Burns, family
They
Burns.
they lived across the street, and that was funny because you know you could mix this all up, and they were like, "Oh wait, which Burns? No, they're going to go back across the street. No, we got to come in our house. You know, 'cause when they saw us, the Burns split up.
Oh, I get you. And I never knew that. I never knew there was another set
Okay,
of
yep.
birds. Okay. All right. It's all coming clear. And that's what's good about this particular project is that once you start talking to a number of residents from Hammond, all the things that you had in your head, now they're being compartmentalized and defined. And so now the real thing is coming out. So this is actually good. So lastly, I just wanted to ask if there's anything, any stories or anything that you want to share that you think is important um, to this project in terms of, say the history of Hammond or any people that should be mentioned in this that needs to be memorialized forever in this. Is there any stories or anything that brings a light to this? Because just know that um, thematically it takes a village to raise a child. And so at one point, all of Hammond, in terms of East Hammond, and also in terms of black people, um, at one point it was those people who raised, the older generation raised this newer generation of people. And it took that mindset to get us to where we are, today. Of course, there's a newer generation, which they don't have that same philosophy. But certainly your generation, my generation, I mean, we could put our fingerprint on what those people had meant to us and what they've taught us and what they put in our mind in terms of even reaching back um, and trying to memorialize this thing. But is there anything that you think that you want to say to be included in this project? Additional. You said a
Um,
lot, but if there's anything else.
okay, first, I'm very grateful for the project because we have spoken about some things that have, for fear of a lesser word, I mean, I need another word, but that have constipated the culture, the cultural
Mhm.
growth of some of our youth.
Mhm.
There are hurts, there are stories of vast successes that aren't being passed on. Okay, so I think
Hmm.
this project is going to let people everywhere be able to relate to our small town and really grasp the humanity so that everybody can say, I mean, people are going to look and they're going to be doing their Ancestry.com and they're going to trace somebody through, they may trace somebody through East Hammond, but our kids that are here now, kids that are in high school, they're going to be able to break down some of the untruths that have been told, and they're going to be able to really shine. I just see our kids, I just believe that East Hammond has produced some of the best minds and hearts of the region. Okay, our kids, as a teacher, I know that our kids care and that our kids push through. We thought the 60s were hard. We thought the 50s were hard. But our kids are now needing our energy and our stories to press through their times. And I just know they'll do it because there's just an amazing happening to me. I mean, for me, I believe that there's an amazing breakthrough, an amazing birth of truth, an amazing awareness that this project is going to just help. And I know it's going to do an amazing thing for East Hammond because more people are going to be able to walk around with pride and knowledge. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, thank you. I just want to thank you for participating and giving your insight, encouragement, words of wisdom, and history. And it's totally an accumulative effect that once I reach my immediate goal of 100 voices from Hammond, I think that it will put another perspective of this little city, and hopefully this project will act as a template for other little cities that have a significant African American population that need to have a voice and be heard and recognized all throughout the country as well as world, since this is on the part of this is going to be on the internet, and certainly at the housed in the Hammond Public Library. So once again, thank you for your participation, and I'll let you know when this comes out.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, hold on.